You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Joining us live on the show, Herculez Gomez. Herculez, how you doing today?
Good, I'm doing well. How you doing?
I am doing great, Herculez. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
We were talking about the Copa, Herculez. What's your thought on the tournament as a whole so far?
It's a very broad question, but it's been a great tournament. I mean, lots of goals, exciting games, intense stuff, quality attacking teams, quality individual players. You know, I think in this tournament you have 6 out of the 10 best FIFA-ranked teams in the world, so it's definitely some good quality football going on.
Absolutely. Now, when you're looking at your experience, we were talking about development earlier. We have a lot of conversation, and Cowherd yesterday went on a rant talking about we're not necessarily hard enough on players, coaches, and we have to be more accountable. What's your thought on this rant? Do you think that he's right? Should we be more accountable on players, or should we be more realistic?
Well, if you want to be considered a top footballing nation, accountability has to be there, absolutely. Right? I think the fact that, you know, that dialogue is happening in mainstream shows like The Herd is a good thing. We want to keep advancing as a footballing nation, so accountability is part of that, so I have no problem with that.
When you're looking at now as well, what is your thought on Klinsman so far in the last couple of tournaments? Do you think that the emphasis on development and young kids, is the chance there, you think, Herculez?
Well, there's a couple of thoughts when you talk about Jurgen. One is, you know, he came in and what he talked about, what he wanted to achieve, are we there yet? Probably not. I would say we're not. To what he said he wanted to do, we haven't done yet. But in tournament play, he's done very well for himself and for the U.S. men's national team. Whether it's to your liking or not, whether it's aesthetic or pleasing to the eye, that's one thing. But he's gotten results, I'd say, every tournament he's played for, except for the last Gold Cup. So, you know, there is that sense of results are there, and as Americans, you know, that's what you want. And in this business, the results are always in business. So it's a double-edged sword, you know, when you talk about that. But if you're asking if everything he proclaimed or promised has come true, the case either. So I think you have to take everything with a grain of salt when you talk about Jurgen and what's going on.
Herc, we were talking earlier in this show about development and whether or not the development system is getting the most out of the system, creating the most talent that it can. It's a question that's been asked many times. Just from your perspective, as someone who's gone through the development system in the United States, is it doing all that it can to produce talent? Can there be improvements there?
Absolutely, there can be improvements. Listen, it's a huge country. Players are going to fall through the cracks. But these are no longer cracks. These are craters. These are very obvious problems in our development. We're a pay-to-play program that nowhere else in the world does this exist. And this model is literally hurting the player development. We have players who can't afford to do club soccer or ODP and choose to go elsewhere. We have other federations coming and plucking our own players in our own backyard and taking them to their countries. So, yeah, there are faults in the developmental program. And what can be done? Well, you know, it's such a tough question because it's more of where can you start? You know, there's so much that can be done. It's not easy. I know due to the demographic and the size and the huge melting pot, we're in a different situation than most countries. But there are, for sure, lots of faults in this development program.
I want to talk a bit about the MLS academies and their role here. In your mind, are they doing enough to sort of focus on producing professional players, on getting players to the first team? Is enough being done there, or are the academies generally still kind of acting in that in-between community outreach, marketing arm almost thing?
It's tough, Duane, because I recall I was part of the first reserve league class, and that was as close to any type of academy or reserve program that we had in the States. And we would have about 8 to 10 games a year. Compared to what you have now at the academy levels where players are actually being groomed into a first-team environment where they're signing homegrown contracts. We're light years ahead now, but it's still not enough. You're still at a level where it's a commodity for these kids to play. It's something of it being fun. You know, it's a distraction to them, a good distraction. But it's not like other countries where it's not commodity, necessity. These kids are looking for a way out for them and their families. So it's a big deal. Listen, as a footballing nation, we're still not there, but I don't think anybody would argue that we're there. The academies, for me, have been doing great because of what we weren't doing back then, but they could always be improving. Like you said, a lot of times it's more of a marketing, community outreach kind of thing, and, you know, I guess that's a little bridging of the gap that you need to go through until you achieve that, but it could definitely be a little bit more advanced.
All right, let's turn it back to the field and the tournament that, it hasn't wrapped up for the U.S. They do have the third-place game left. But in your mind, regardless of what happens in that third-place game, which is always a bit of an odd thing, was it a successful tournament for the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it's a success. It's a semifinal game that you got to in a major tournament. Mexico did not get to that game. You know, those are your rivals. You're always comparing one and the other. You had some very good moments as far as getting results and getting the people to believe and getting your own players to believe. I think that was so important. You finally found a consistency and identity under this regime. So for me, those are all positives on paper. Now we're in the business of results. So you want to keep getting wins, and you want to keep seeing production. You want to keep seeing that value that you've added, you know, come to fruition. And if you look at things, maybe there are a few realities that were being hidden because of those results. Maybe there were a few people out there that were drinking the Kool-Aid, thinking, you know, this is it, we've gotten there. When the reality is, we played well against good teams, and we're getting better. But you know, to put us up there with the Argentinas and Chiles of the world, it's very difficult. But I think we're the first ones to recognize that. I will say, with the players that were suspended, if those players are in that game, it's a totally different game. It's still a game you're looking at probably losing 9 out of 10 times because of the quality of the Argentine team. But it's still a game that we can compete on that day. And that was the unfortunate thing, is we didn't get the chance to compete at 100% against a very good team, which would have been a very good test for us.
Herculez Gomez on the way to training, so we won't keep you much longer, but just a couple more quick ones. I do want to address the Mexico situation and the final game there. Outlier or illustration of something deeper that's happening?
I think it's an illustration of something deeper. I don't think people on the outside realize Mexico's going through a big change right now, and their program will suffer. Right now in the domestic league, they have a new rule called the 10-8 rule, where now on a game day roster, you only have to have 8 domestic players on your roster. It's a way for them to, now the new lax foreigner rules that are permitting foreigners to come in and play as nationals. You may have one day found an all foreigner lineup in Mexico like you did maybe Arsenal in the Premier League a few years ago, and they don't want that. So but they want the foreigners to come in because they're attractive, they're cheaper, they play a good brand, and it makes the league ultimately stronger. So what they did is they made this rule where now you have to have 8 nationals at least on the game day roster. So the most you can have of foreigners in play is 10. Well, that stifles the national product, the development of the national product. It makes it harder for the Mexican player to even debut, to get out there and to have consistency in lineups. And you're going to see that kind of shift towards the national team. When those players and that development stifles, the national team's going to suffer. And you're kind of seeing it now with these guys some of these guys aren't even starters on their own club teams, and now they're playing with the national team, and they're not used to that role. And listen, they had, I think it was something like 21, 22 unbeaten games in the world. It was the longest streak in FIFA football. But I think a lot of that wasn't what people thought. If you look at the games, the stretch ran back, you know, the total of 3 managers ran back to all these crazy friendlies in the U.S., a lot of them not up to par opponents. Some of them were. You know, they beat Uruguay in Copa America. But keep in mind, Uruguay didn't have the greatest Copa America. They had some very good wins. They had a Confederations Cup playoff win against the States. Keep in mind, both teams were having problems at Gold Cup. All the drama that went around it. I think it's something more than just one bad game. Obviously, a 7-0 isn't something normal, and not for Mexico. And Chile's a very good team, but you play that game 10 more times, you don't get that scoreline. 100 more times, you don't get that scoreline. It's an isolated incident, but I think there is something underlying there.
And turning our attention to the final, Argentina-Chile, thoughts on that? Argentina's looked unbeatable in this tournament. They certainly have seemed very motivated to win it. Do you think they finished the job?
Listen, I picked Argentina to win this before the tournament started. But the way that Chile is playing, how dynamic they are going forward, the speed in transition, Alexis Sanchez and Vargas right now, the way they're playing, I don't know if I'd like to shift that pick. It's going to be such a great game. I saw a team, Argentina, beat Chile without Messi, and I only ask myself if they can play the same defensive transition game with Messi. It's not his strong suit. I remember a World Cup ago, or a few World Cups ago, Messi he was one of the players who ran least out of anybody on the field. It's a different Argentina team now. It's a different Chile team under Pizzi. It'll be very interesting. I'm still going with Argentina because I want to be loyal to my original pick, but Chile's playing at an unbelievable pace right now, and I don't know if it'll be too much for Argentina.
Fair enough. Quick, Herc, were you ever involved in a third-place game as a player? I'm just wondering what the motivation will be like for that game.
I've never done a third-place game, fortunately.
Yeah, fortunately, that's the key there. How do they motivate themselves to play it, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's very difficult because I'm sure everybody's seen the comments, the post-game comments by the players, and that's not necessarily what you want out of a fan, but as a player, you want to win championships. You want to be in finals. Nobody dreams of playing a third-place match, but you're still representing your country. You're representing yourself. You're representing your people. So there's still something to be played for, and it's still a major tournament. Copa America is a major tournament. The U.S. has never done better than fourth place in the Copa America, and in this modern era, to do that, I think would send a big message that we're a growing footballing nation.
All right. We really appreciate your time on the way to training today. Hopefully we hear your voice in more media in the future, although we still want to see you in the field for a while longer. Herculez Gomez, thanks again.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.